Hello there everybody, Scotia here, and welcome to the final chapter review for the final chapter of the Street Fighter 6 UDON comic prequel series. So after 4 weeks, we're finally at the end. Street Fighter 6 is literally out next week, and we've finally got the final issue of the tie-in series. So it's very exciting stuff. I'm very excited to get into it, and obviously can't wait for Street Fighter 6 itself to come out. Format of this chapter is going to be exactly the same as the previous chapter, where I'm not going to go over it page by page, but if I have something to say about a particular scene or moment or bit of dialogue, I'm going to go over it. So if there's a moment that you like from this chapter that I didn't mention, or any chapter really, or any page, or anything, feel free to go and mention it in the comments, if you want my opinion on it. If I didn't mention it in this video or previous videos, I will more than likely see it and reply back to it, and we can talk about it there. See, that's what it's going to be. It just makes the video go a bit quicker, so I'm not wasting my time talking about stuff that I don't really have, a lot to say. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. So, like I said, if you watch the previous videos, you know how it's going to be. But, yeah, without further ado, let's just get into it. So the first scene I want to talk about is one that's a little bit into the chapter, only a few pages in, and it's when Ken is talking to Kalima, who was JP's assistant secretary type thing in the first chapter. And at the end of the previous chapter, obviously, we saw Luke and the other PMC soldiers had Ken at gunpoint after he had essentially sacrificed the many to save the few in this case being his son Mel. And oh yeah, one thing, so I said in the previous one, in the previous chapter video, I was I didn't really know if Ken had actually done anything, if it was a dud, because it was basically JP said either blow up this drone and potentially kill tons of people, or have Mel get blown up, and Ken saved Mel and blew up the drone. But it never really said or not, we didn't see anything that outwardly said Ken actually did blow up the drone or not. So I thought it was a dud and it was a trick by JP to just mess with Ken. But no, at the start of this chapter, the first thing we see is oh no, Ken actually did blow up that drone. Nobody was killed, which is kind of not eye-rolly, but it's a bit convenient that only people were injured, and Ken doesn't have blood on his hands. Don't forget, we can't have our hero characters actually be morally grey and do stuff like that. Nobody was injured, it's fine, everyone. So yeah, that's a bit of a kind of okay then, sure. But no, he actually did fully sacrifice random people for Mel. So that was interesting. I wish the last chapter had actually conveyed that a bit better, because like I said, I really didn't have any clue if that had actually happened or not. Like I said, I left that chapter thinking that it was just a dud and that JP had just tricked him. So that was interesting. But anyway, so Ken's about to be shot by Luke and the others. Well, probably not Luke. I can't remember if Luke was actively trying to shoot him as well. But the soldiers shot at Ken, but he was saved by Kalima and thrown out of a building, and he went into the river and was slowly drifting down. But the person who saved him got shot in the back. That was Kalima. It was confirmed in this chapter that was Kalima. I said it might have been her at the end of the previous chapter. What's weird though is that in this whole conversation, it doesn't actually look like she's injured in any way, so I don't know if I just missed that. But yeah, anyway, so Ken is very untrusting towards Kalima, which is natural, because last he would have saw her, she was working right alongside JP. But no, it turns out Kalima is actually an ally of ours. She's very much against JP. She was tricked by JP just as much as Ken was. And we actually get a bit of a explanation. We get a bit of a deeper kind of dive into how JP does things, but we first get a little hint of how JP does things. And basically he kind of just goes country to country, basically just moving in with his NGO, trying to make, we're here to bring progress to this country. And then when he leaves, it's just in a way worse state than when he found it, so it's very interesting villain type thing to do. It's very different to what we've had in Street Fighter so far, where we just had very outwardly I'm evil characters. When you look at Bison, you look at Gil, and you look at Seth, it's oh no, these characters are very much very megalomanic, very obviously dictatorish, which is makes sense given Bison's nickname has always been Dictator. So it's very different to have JP, and this was the thing they said that JP represented duality in a lot of ways, the kind of the both sides of JP. And again, later on I'll get into more detail about it when it comes up later on. But yeah, it is a very big part of it, of JP's identity, the duality, the kind of hiding in plain sight type of thing. And I just think I think it's a very interesting villain that we've not really had in Street Fighter before, so I think that's really cool. And I actually, I ended up walking away from this comic probably in terms of playable characters appreciating JP the most, which is good, and which was needed, because he is pretty much our only real villain in the game. So that's good, and I think that was definitely a big plus to come out of these comics. So then jumping ahead to the Colosseum Fight, where Ken takes on Luke, and Ken shows up and everyone's shocked, and Mel's, who's managed to escape from JP, Like, everyone's just chanting for Ken, to get beat because everyone still thinks he's a terrorist and all this. And my continued kind of like, not hatred, but my continued kind of like frustration at Luke is just, tenfold here, where like Luke just, he's so already dead set on like his opinion that Ken is the reason for everything. Like he is so. It's a thing where it's like, I get he's being manipulated, and I get you want the frustration, like the frustration at Luke for not seeing things as they are. I think is very intended by the writer, as like they want Luke to be like, oh, like Luke is just being manipulated, but like everyone else. But what frustrates me the most here is that like there is no effort on Luke's part to actually like think about things. He's just so. Like, he's already so dead set on the fact that, like, Ken is a terrorist, he's to blame, he's a murderer, he blew people up. And obviously, like, he references his dad during this fight, like, oh, like, my dad was lost to a terrorist like you. And it's like, I get it, and I get they want Luke to be manipulated, they want it to be the frustration to be like, oh, Luke's a good guy, Ken's a good guy, but Luke's not seeing it because JP's manipulating him. But to me, it just makes Luke seem like even more of an idiot. Because it's like, there was never a point where Luke once questioned any of this. Like, he never questioned Ken, he never questioned JP. And I don't know, maybe I'm being too harsh on him, but I don't know, I just, the frustration I get is like, yeah, the intended frustration of like, oh, why can't the two good guys see eye to eye that they're being manipulated by, the bad guy, but like, I know Luke's just refusal and stubbornness to actually like not even like hear Ken out, but just there's never been a point in the series where like Luke has at any point just the idea, the mere thought that like maybe Ken, like maybe this billionaire, maybe like why would a billionaire be a terrorist? That like I thought never has crossed his mind once, and that's the frustrating part where it's like I don't know, it just feels very mindless on Luke's part to me of just like why would you not even think about stuff? But anyway, yeah. So they have a big fight, and we find out how Luke gets his scar, and surprisingly, it's from Ken. I think it was like very apparent from the start that like we would find out how Luke got the big scar across his eye in this like prequel series, and I kind of figured it would be like a bomb or something would go off and Luke would say someone, or JP would do it or something, like more JP side things or explosion. But no, Ken literally just uppercuts him across the eye and gives him it. So that's quite cool. That kind of adds a bit more to the rivalry with Ken and Luke, which honestly, like in general, like I know I just talk about Luke, being, in my opinion, being a bit kind of like stubborn and not wanting to even think about the possibility that Ken isn't involved, but like I know I didn't expect them to actually like just be like legitimate like rivals or something like that. Like, and it's gonna be interesting because I don't know, so far in Street Fighter 6, Luke seems like just pretty chill about everything, and like I'm gonna get to it, but like the way this ends, I think is very unsatisfying. I think it does not lead into Street Fighter 6 like World Tour as we know it like well at all. So yeah, like that, but I'll get to that like later on. But like Luke just seems very chill in general about things. He's got a big scar across his eye now, and obviously from Ken. Maybe we'll see it in World Tour. Maybe we'll get an idea later on. But like at the moment, it just seems odd that like Luke is just so jovial and jolly, and like, oh yeah, hey, cool, like here's my students. Oh yeah, like let's all go be pals and get ice cream and shit like that. And I'm just like, dude, like, you should be furious. Like, you should be, like, hunting Ken down still. Because he's so determined throughout the series, like, especially last chapter and this chapter. Like, I've got to be the one to get Ken. And obviously, he's doing it for Mel. I don't know, like, at the moment, it feels like a bit of a disconnect there. Like I said, maybe I'll be proven wrong. And I hope I am proven wrong when the game comes out. But at the moment, that's just something that I just think is weird. So while Ken and Luke are fighting, Kalima tries to confront JP, but it doesn't work at all. She ends up getting stabbed by her own sword or knife or whatever it is. And then JP has like another big like villain monologue, and he just kind of walks away scot-free, which is kind of like expected. Like he wasn't going to, get his comeuppance here, because obviously that's going to be saved for the main game. But Camilla is stabbed by her own sword, and obviously she's pretty much down and out. I don't think she's going to die here. There's hints to her in arcade mode and World Tour about like a missing NGO employee, and a character that very much looks like her. It was in one of the like hype reels for the World Tour demo. So like this is very much not the end for her. She's going to definitely show up at some point in the game. But as that happens and JP just kind of walks away from it all, Ken manages to defeat Luke, which is like, I don't know, I was not expecting Ken to get such a clear-cut victory. Like he had Luke like this entire like fight. Like even when he stops and tells Luke, like, hey, I feel bad, you can get a free shot, is like payment for me, jabbing you in the eye at the start of the fight. Luke, like, absolutely wallops Ken, and Ken just, like, no-sells it, and then immediately afterwards, like, the literal next panel, he just absolutely whacks Luke back. But yeah, anyway, so yeah, I was just really surprised that, like, Luke kind of, like, just didn't really, not have a strong showing. He still looked good and all that, but, like, he didn't really have a chance against Ken, which, like, I get and I don't get. I get because it's Ken, and obviously you don't want to have, like, the new guy come in and just completely destroy, the old favorite, but at the same time, like, Luke's the kind of the new hotness, so to speak. Like, he's obviously, he's the main character of the game. He's going to be, the one of the newcomers that, Capcom are probably going to want to push the most, which is obviously why he's here and all that. But yeah, like, he had no chance against Ken. But anyway, yeah, so, like, Luke is just full undefeated. He's out, but Ken is immediately surrounded. And this is actually a shot from Ken's arcade mode. I literally, as I'm recording this and I'm looking at the panels, I've just realised, like, this is actually, it's the shot we saw where Ken's, like, shirtless. Like, that's something we saw, like, months ago. This is actually, like, from this, like, this moment where Ken is on his knees, his hands behind his head, and he's got guns pointed at him. So that moment was from this, when he gets captured in Neyshal. And then, what's really weird, and this is going to be my, like, overall big complaint about this chapter, is, actually, no, sorry, before that, because obviously, like, Ken is obviously, he's being, held at gunpoint. He's pretty much been arrested, or you would think so anyway. But we then cut to Chun-Li and Li Fen. I knew Chun-Li was going to show up, but, like, I really don't know why she was even in this, in this prequel series. She didn't really do anything. But basically, her and Li Fen have, a cute conversation, and then, like, they're ribbing each other and stuff like that. And this is where we actually get the most interesting stuff about JP, where Li Fen actually, like, goes into, like, the info about JP that's out there. His name isn't Johann Petrovich. Like, there's cases here where he's called, like, Jean-Philippe and stuff. And basically, it just kind of goes into a bit more detail about what Kalima said at the start, about, like, how JP goes from, like, country to country, and it's like, he goes to this one country, and when he leaves, there's a civil war. Basically, he's just a walking, like, disaster. We then end this scene on a bit of a frustrating note for me, because as Li Fen and Chun-Li are just, like, leaving to go get food or shopping or whatever, on Li Fen's computer, you see, like, the screen flashes, like, errors and something. Obviously, they don't notice this, but then you see, like, the word Shadaloo pop up in the middle, and I'm just like, oh, can we, like, we really just couldn't get one game without them. Like, it's so insane to me just how, like, hooked on just Street Fighter 2 in general, and like, that faction, like, we are never escaping them. Like, I knew Bison was coming back. Like, this isn't a Bison thing. Like, I knew Bison's coming back. I know he is. Like, he's too much of a fan favorite. Like, I think Matsumoto's even said Bison's his favorite character. Like, Bison is 100% coming back. But my thing was, like, I'm fine with Bison coming back if it means that, like, Shadaloo is still done. Like, I want Bison back, but just on his own. Like, have Vega do his own thing, have, Balrog do his own thing, and have Bison just there. But, we were never going to be that lucky, were we? They're still just so hooked on just ramming us up with the same shit that we've been getting for, like, 30 years now. So, yeah, Shadaloo's probably going to come back in this game at some point. Maybe it's not how it seems, maybe it's not this, maybe JP's using it, and maybe, maybe it's a new Shadaloo thing. I don't know. I just don't want it at all, I just so, like, even if it would have come back in, like, Street Fighter 7 or whatever, I just wanted at least one game where, like, I just didn't have to hear about Shadaloo, and, not have to have, like, the risk or the thought of them, oh, Shadaloo's coming back, like, Bison's, because it's that thing of, like, I know it's death in a fighting game, and I know Bison's going to come back, but to just immediately go back on it is just so, like, it's to the point now where it's like, I just don't care. Like, if a character dies, why bother caring about it? Because they're just going to come back. Like, if Bison comes back, why should I even be invested in his downfall? Because he's just going to come back. And it's like, why care about that? Like, why be like, oh, Bison? Because this is just the thing they've written themselves into so long now, where it's like, Bison dies, he comes, oh, he's got a new body and he's back in the next game. Bison dies, oh, he's got a new body and he's back in the next game. Or Bison dies, it's just this constant loop of just, like, and again, death in the fighting game, I know it means nothing in general, but, like, if you're writing a story and you're focusing on a story and you want, like, it was a big payoff at the end of Street Fighter 5 when, like, Bison was finally done. And, like, obviously, even back then, we knew deep down he was going to come back, but, like, I don't know, I just wanted a bit more of a gap. Like, at least make that moment like have some weight to it of being like, Bison Shadloo for at least one game are just gone. Like there was an actual, like, even if you go back to it like immediately Street Fighter 7, like Street Fighter 7 is immediately like here's Shadloo, here's Bison. That's a problem in itself, but like that's okay, because at least for 6, that moment at the end of 5 where he died meant something. If they just bring him back and they bring back Shadloo in this game, then it just means nothing, and I'm just at the point where I'm just like, I just don't care. Like, the story means nothing. You can do all the prequel comics you want, you can do the big massive world tour mode, you can have the best artists in the world work on arcade mode. If you do stuff like that, I'm not going to care, because what's the point of getting invested in, narratives and things changing and people moving on if you're just going to keep going back to what was popular 30 years ago? So that's my mini rant about it. I am absolutely jumping the gun on this. It's literally just Shadloo appearing on a computer screen. It could mean anything, but I'm just kind of getting my ramble out there, early, just in case this does end up being what I think it is, and this is the start of the tease that Shadloo is coming back, and it's like Vega and Fang and Balrog, and I just can't be bothered. I'm just like so over this group. I have no problem with the characters coming back, but like, I so desperately want Shadloo as a faction to just die. Like, I'm so sick of it. I'm so sick of it coming back, and just it never really getting its comeuppance. Like, Shadloo itself, like, it never gets punishment for being, the evil cartel that it is. Like, it's just always, oh, Bison's gone. Well, we'll see you later. See you in like 2 years when we finally bring him back from the dead. It just makes it so meaningless. But yeah, anyway, so that rant aside. Or should I say, one rant aside into another rant, as we get to the ending of the prequel series, where we see Mel and Ken in Metro City, and Mel is obviously, very solemn as he's clearing out Ken's office. But we see Ken walking through the streets of Metro City, and ends on like kind of a sweet note where, like, Mel's like, like, wherever you are, Dad, like, I'll be there for you. Like, I know you're out there protecting me, looking out for me, trying to, save the day. And, it is very nice, but, like, how did Ken get in Metro City? Like, literally just think about it. The last, like, literally 2 pages before this, or maybe not 2 pages, but 2 or 3 pages before this, Ken was, like, on his knees, hands behind his head, in a foreign country, with guns pointed at him. And then, like, 2-3 pages later, he's in Metro City, he's got the Eagle Security Company coat, he's right where he is at the start of Street Fighter 6. How did he get that? Like, and it's that thing of, like, I'd said in a previous chapter review that we were probably going to see Ken in Metro City, and like pretty much leading up right to the moment where we'll see him in the game, and that's fine. I knew that was going to happen, but like, to just have no build up towards that, that's a big gap. Like, how did Ken leave Neyshal? Like, how did he leave Neyshal? How did he get on a plane? Did he get arrested by the PMC, get transported to America, and then escape there? I don't know. Would have been nice to know. I doubt we'll ever know, really. I don't know how the game's going to answer that question, because that's kind of like in the past now. Like, what happened in Neyshal is the setup that's been done now. So, like, I don't know how we will know. How, it's just so confusing. Why completely skip that? Why not even show? Like, I get you've got like a certain amount of pages, but like, why did we need the scene with Li Fen and Chun-Li? Because it's like, yeah, we got the cool info about GP, but like, we already kind of like got a basic idea with Kalima earlier. Could have just had that, what was said there, by Kalima earlier in the chapter. If you really wanted that info out there, the Shadloo tease at the end, whatever, could have had that at any point. Just, like, we could have, instead of that Chun-Li scene, just kind of like, oh yeah, like, Chun-Li was in this prequel series, I know she was pretty much completely irrelevant, but hey, here she is again, just to kind of like make it a bit more worth her appearance, like, oh, we didn't just use her once, like, here she is again. Like, instead of having that, why didn't we just show what happened to Ken? I don't know. It's just really weird, and I think it was just a really kind of like, it makes the ending feel rushed, because like, I don't know, just so many little things that we could have seen answered. I guess, like, how did Ken get the coat, stuff like that, like, we just never saw that. And yeah, it's a weird hang-up, I know, and, the main answer is that, like, it just wasn't important enough to really show, but, like, to me, it's, like, it's just little things like that kind of just make it, I don't know, just seem that little bit less, professional. No, maybe not professional, but just, I don't know, it's just weird. I think it's weird that, like, it's just that jump, and just that completely unanswered question of, like, how did Ken, literally as a fugitive, get on a plane and go across the world to a different country? I don't know, it's really weird, but yeah, so that's pretty much where it ends, and then that's obviously going to lead into where Ken is. Didn't really answer Luke, like, we didn't really get anything from Luke in that conclusion. Like, he got knocked out by Ken in the fight, and then, like, he was gone for the rest of it. I thought maybe we get, like, a bit of, like, Luke back in America being like, oh, you failed in the Neyshal thing, so you're being sent, you're training these recruits, which is how we get into him, training the main character in Bosch in World Tour. I was expecting something like that, but no, didn't even really get that. Maybe that's being saved for his arcade mode. I don't know, because I've heard the arcade modes are pretty much like the prequels to the World Tour stuff, so maybe that gets answered there. But yeah, just very odd. Like basically like the two main characters in this, Ken and Luke, we only really got stuff from Ken. Like we didn't get anything from Luke, which was weird. But yeah, so that's basically it, and that's the ending of the prequel series. So yeah, now I'm kind of just gonna go in a big ramble about my overall thoughts on just the series as a whole, because I do have thoughts, and I do have, maybe not controversial, but I have a few hot takes that some people may not agree with about the whole thing. So yeah, just might as well get right into it. So finally, we are here at the conclusion of the UDON comic prequel series, and overall, I did enjoy them. I definitely don't think I enjoyed them as much as other people did. Like, I've seen people on forums and Twitter and stuff, like, really praising this a lot and really saying, like, oh, this is, like, some of the best narrative stuff we've had for Street Fighter. I definitely disagree with that. I don't think it was that good. I think there was definitely... I think my thing is, not that it wasn't that good, but I just think it could have been a lot better. I think if Capcom just, like, really unshackled themselves from these weird hang-ups they have, that I think just really like limit them narratively. And obviously the big one I'm going to talk about is cameos. Like, there was a good potential for a lot of cameos that really could have like added to the story. I'm not saying like a cameo every 5 pages or something like that, but like there could have been more people involved in the story. There should have been more people involved in the story than there were. And I think in that sense, I feel like the story was very contained in a really weird way, where it was like, obviously this is Street Fighter 6, prequel series, so the main focus is going to be characters who are in Street Fighter 6, and I get that, and I have no problem with that. But it was really just weirdly contained to just basically Ken and Luke and JP, and I get that the main plot is basically going to pretty much be around those three, or at least those two in Ken and JP. So that's not too surprising. But like a lot of characters, like Ryu was never mentioned at any point. I thought maybe we could have seen a bit of Ryu and like his reaction to what's going on. But then again, maybe we'll get that in the game. But then we had like other roles like that were in this, like from actual characters, like Chun-Li. I know I've just talked about Chun-Li just now, but like I really don't know why she was in this, like other than to just get another character in the game. But honestly, she ultimately really just felt completely irrelevant. Like to be honest, the biggest thing she probably did was like save Ken, which I think is at the end of chapter 1. But like outside of that, like she really didn't do anything. Like if you removed Chun-Li like as a whole, like from this prequel series, like nothing really changes. Like her saving Ken could have just been done by Kalima, who ended up saving him later on anyway. So like I don't know, her whole presence just felt really pointless. I'm still like not a big fan of the Interpol thing, even though I admit there was never really anything in Street Fighter 3 that said that she'd left, but there also wasn't anything that said that she was still like there. But I'm just still not a fan of the change in general. Even her scene in this chapter felt like it was just a vehicle to get more info on JP and like the little Shadlu tease at the end. Like yeah, I think everything that she did in this like prequel like series could have been done by another character. Like we didn't need to see her at all. And yeah, it just made her feel very weird. But then you get like on the other side of the coin, it's like yeah, like so that was a character that was in this that didn't need to be in this. But then you have a character who needed to be in this but wasn't. And the two big ones for me, number one is Eliza. I am baffled that Eliza was not even mentioned. Like, Mel didn't even so much as say, like, a mom or anything like that. Like, this whole, like, prequel series, I was expecting a panel at literally any moment of, like, Eliza's reaction to what was going on, to Mel being in Nashal and being involved, to Ken, like, the accusations against Ken. Just nothing, like, just no word from her at all. So confusing. Like, that one is, like, genuinely, like, baffling to me, like I said. Like, I have no idea why Eliza had no role at all, like no presence, no mention, nothing. It was like she didn't exist. Like so confusing. I don't know why that was the case. And then the other one, obviously you all know who I'm going to talk about here. I did my best to not talk about him in chapter 3, and I've done well to not talk about him so far in this chapter review. Obviously it's Sean, and I said from the start, like I never expected Sean to be in this, and I didn't, like I full on, like I did not expect Sean to be in this. I felt like he wasn't really going to be relevant enough at the time. My assumption for a long time has been that once Ken defeats JP and clears his name, he's going to have a scene where he reunites with Eliza, Mel, and Sean. That's always been my assumption. Now at this point, now that we're like a week away from launch, I don't think Sean's going to be in Street Fighter 6 at all. Like at any point. Maybe playable down the line, I don't know. But like in terms of cameos and being involved in Ken's story, I'm not expecting him at all. And this comic series has definitely, bumped that up, because, again, I wasn't expecting him to show up. I didn't even really have many thoughts about him even being mentioned, but, like, just the complete lack of, like, where is he? Is he still training with Ken? Is he doing his own thing? Is he off now? Is he doing this? Is he doing that? Nothing. Not a word. And it's just disappointing, and it's honestly like one of my biggest concerns about Street Fighter 6 at this point is that like they're just going to skimp out on the cameos, like, and I think, and this is, I think the reason is going to be because they don't want to, get hopes up or, get like, oh, here's a character with new design, but we're not going to make them playable, because that happened a lot in Street Fighter 5. There were a lot of characters that showed up in that game, in the character stories that, were never playable but had new designs, and I've always thought, like, cameos are one, like, if a character cameos and then they never become playable, that's fine. Like, I would just like to see a character. It helps make the world, feel a bit bigger. That, that there's actually people in here doing stuff at the same time. Even if they're not playable, these characters are doing things. And it's just so frustrating to see Capcom with Street Fighter, which has such a wider range of just characters that they could use in this world. And, like, they just do nothing with them, and they just don't exist. Like, if they're not playable, they just don't exist. And that's so frustrating to me, because, and this is the thing where it's like, in like one of the art books that they did for Street Fighter 5, like, this is the thing that Nakayama says of like, cameos are really good at help bolstering the narrative. They help make characters stronger, they help make their character relationships stronger, and I completely agree. I think cameos are great because it just helps make the world that these characters are living in a bit, feel a bit fuller, a bit more real. And like, I'm not asking for the world here. Like, I didn't want Sean to come in and start beating up people and, taking on Luke and JP and single-handed. I didn't want that. I didn't expect that. Like, that's just silly. I just something, an acknowledgement that he exists, that he still, like, has that relationship with his family. Like, all you needed to do in, like, chapter 2 or something when things are going wrong is have a line where Mel says, like, I've been trying to call my mom and Sean, but I've not been getting through to any of them. That's all you needed to do. You didn't need like a big cameo reveal or anything like that. It just a line where you go, yeah, okay, here's the nod. Like, here's the thing that says Sean is still close with his family. He's not involved. He's not going to get involved, but he exists. He's there. He's doing his own thing at the same time that this is going on. That's all they needed to do, and not just with Sean, but with other characters like I said, Ryu. We could have found out how Ryu feels about all this. Like I said, I'm sure we'll find out in the main game, but just with other characters not even relating to the situation, like, there's so many things that, like, they could do with the characters that aren't playable at the moment, and they just won't for some reason. I just feel like they're not going to. Like, I have no expectations for cameos in arcade mode, and I had a lot when the game, first started getting, info. I was expecting, like, a few cameos to show up, like characters to show up in World Tour as well. But I feel like the only cameos we're really going to get in World Tour are like super obscure characters that were never going to be playable anyway, like Carlos and like Retsu, and characters that we've seen already. Like, those are the caliber of like cameos I'm expecting from this game, which I just think is really lame. Like, not to say that those characters are lame, but like, if you're trying to build this as the world of Street Fighter, if you're trying to sell World Tour as like this is, explore the world of Street Fighter, but you're only limiting it to these like random NPCs and these playable characters. Like, you have so many Street Fighter characters, like, these characters exist, but like, you're just not acknowledging they exist until they become playable. It's just so silly to me, and I think it's such a shame. And it's so weird as well, like, going back to what I just said about like Nakayama. It's like, he said like exactly what I'm saying, like all these things about cameos and how they help, and like, there was tons of them in Street Fighter 5 and they were great. Like, even though Sean never became playable, it was just cool to see him existing. Like, he was with Laura, in Brazil doing stuff. Like, he was existing. He was doing his own thing. He just wasn't playable. He just wasn't involved in the main story of the game. And I just think it's such a shame, such a missed opportunity. And I think it just makes the story weaker. Like, I think just not using the full potential of the cast of characters you have. And obviously, it's like, make characters make sense with the story. Like I said, like, Sean was never going to come in and start kicking ass. Like, it was never going to happen. Like, Ryu was never going to come in to Neishal. Like, obviously, because it's like, you'll save that for later. Like, you'll save these characters coming in for better times. But, like, just acknowledgement. That's all I wanted. I just wanted to think, like, hey, this character exists, and they're doing things. They're not involved in this story, but, they're around. And we didn't even get that. And, like I said, I'm going to save this rant and ramble, for a better time once we've actually played Street Fighter 6 and we know fully how it's going to go. I could be completely wrong. I'm definitely not expecting Sean, like, to cameo in Street Fighter 6 in any of, like, Ken's story stuff. I just don't, because the feeling I get so far from everything we've seen from 6 is that they very much want to keep the presence of the actual Street Fighter characters saved when they become playable. And that's great for the characters that are pretty much guaranteed to become playable. For the characters that really don't have a shot, or are very unlikely, or don't have that great of a chance. It's very unfortunate that they're just going to get left out and just don't exist. Like they're just not going to be there. Basically, it's just like for Street Fighter 6, if you're not playable, you just don't exist really, which I just think is so lame. But yeah, anyway, so that's the big rant. That's probably my biggest issue with this series, is that like it could have been, like, it is good. Like, I'm not going to say it's bad. It is good. I've enjoyed it, but like it could have been better. And that's my kind of like closing thought on it. Really, is that like I just think in every chapter there's always been room for something to be better. Like there was room for them to help expand the world a bit more. Not have the story just be so contained. I think that's probably my biggest issue, is that it's just so contained to like just this really small circle of like Ken, Luke, JP, Mel, Chun-Li, and that's it. And it's like, I felt like they could have just done more with it. But as as it goes in terms of building up towards the story of Street Fighter 6 and where we are with Ken and Luke and everyone, I think it's fine. I think it did the job. Didn't do the job perfectly or amazingly, but it did it well enough to, it's like, you know what, I'm probably invested in seeing how things are going to go. I think at the end of the day, that's all they really needed to do. I think that's all they really wanted to do in terms of, to make this a success. I think my thoughts on it and my kind of like hopes and kind of expectations were really irrelevant at the end of the day. It didn't really matter like what I wanted from it. It was always going to be what it is. So, in that sense, there's nothing I can really say about it too much. Like, I've said my piece. I think it's a good series. Is it the best narrative in Street Fighter? No. I actually went in more detail about this in the last review for some reason. I should have saved it for this one. But basically, I said, like, I think the comic format has helped make this story seem deeper than what it actually is. Like, it's, it has depth to it. And I'm not going to say it's hollow or anything, but, like, just I think the comic format has helped it, make it seem a bit fuller and a bit stronger and bulkier than what it actually is. I feel like if this story was in like a typical arcade ending, it would not get the praise it's getting. But because it's stretched out enough for it to be, like thought bubbles and panels and stuff and artwork, I think it really helps kind of like make it seem stronger. Whereas like, I think if you took any narrative from like the older Street Fighter games that were just stuck, telling their narrative in like bios and arcade endings, I think if you took any of them and put them in a comic format, they would be just as strong, if not as like stronger than what we've had in these, in these chapters. But yeah, I'm gonna leave it here, to be honest. Like, I could probably ramble forever, to be honest, but I think there's nothing else really I can say. I think I've gone over the stronger points that I want to say. Overall, I definitely think this was a good series. I'm glad it exists. I'd like more of it in some ways. Like, I'd like, later on, and once the game has way more characters and stuff added to it, I'd like more kind of like, not so much like a big all-encompassing prequel series, but just just something to kind of like help kind of like go, oh, okay, here's what the characters that weren't in Street Fighter 6 day one, like here's how they got involved in all of this. But I suppose that's what arcade endings and stuff will probably be for. But yeah, with that all that said, I hope you all enjoyed this very brief, comic series run and the reviews for it. I definitely enjoyed covering it. It's been fun. It's just been good to, get more of Street Fighter Story. As a big fan of it for so long, it's been good to get more of it in such a cool format. I think it's just been neat, and I'm glad, Capcom went out their way to go do this with UDON. I think it's really cool, and I hope, like I said, I hope this happens more in the future. But yeah, I'm just going to leave things here. If you have any questions or you want me to go more into detail about things, then just, hit me up in the comments. I'll do my best to reply whenever I can. But with that all out the way, I shall see you all next week for the release of Street Fighter 6. Finally, after all the months and the waiting and all this and the content, it's finally here. It's going to be very exciting. I'm still going to do the live stream, the midnight release, my time, 12 a.m. BST. I do know my times, I promise. Yeah, so please look forward to that. It'll be great. Obviously, it'll get uploaded afterwards, so even if you can't, watch it live, you'll be able to see my reactions to certain stuff. I'm mainly going to be focusing on the arcade endings and stuff. I'm not really going to be going into World Tour, because by the time, I'm only going to be streaming for like an hour. So within an hour, I doubt I'll really get that far into World Tour to really it'll be mostly stuff you'll have seen anyway from the demos and stuff. So yeah, I'm just going to focus on arcade mode. So yeah, it'll be fun. I'm very much looking forward to it. But yeah, before I ramble on even more, I shall see you all later. Goodbye.
We await your return, warrior.